I am Dr. Rahul Sharma and I would demonstrate to you the application of independent sample t-test and how to apply this test using IBM SPSS software. Independent sample t-test is also known as two sample t-test and it is also called as student's t-test. Independent sample t-test is an inferential statistical test that determines whether there is a statistically significant difference between the means in two unrelated groups. For the purpose of this demonstration, I am considering this hypothetical example, which goes like this. A researcher wants to know whether one fertilizer brand, that is F1, causes plants to grow faster than the other fertilizer brand F2. So there are two different fertilizer brands F1 and F2. This researcher has used identical seeds and have grown the plants in identical conditions. He randomly assigns the use of F1 fertilizer to few of the plants and F2 fertilizer to others. So there is no plant which has been treated with both of the fertilizers. If a plant is given fertilizer F1, then the same plant has not been given the fertilizer from brand F2. The height of the plants is measured after 4 weeks. So the idea here is to determine, is there a difference in the performance that is based on height of the plant of the fertilizer brand F1 and F2? If we see the data, there are two fertilizer brands given to us, F1 and F2. For every fertilizer brand entry, there is an equivalent height of the plant in centimeters given, which have been noted down by the researcher after 4 weeks. So there are two fertilizer brands now and height of the plant is given to us. Let us understand the problem more clearly. How many population or samples are there? In this case, there are two samples, one based on fertilizer 1 and other of plant height based on fertilizer F2. What is the variable of interest in this case? It is the height of the plant, which is also our test variable. How many sample means would be considered? Because there are two samples, so we would be considering two sample means. Now, having clarity about this thing, we need to check for few of the assumptions before we can go with the application of independent sample t-test. First being, there needs to be one independent categorical variable having two levels or groups. In our case, this independent variable is the fertilizer brand. There are two types of fertilizer brands in this case, so we have met this assumption. Then our dependent variable or the test variable should be a continuous one. In our case, the height of the plant is the test variable or dependent variable and it is measured on a continuous scale. Now we need to check for the normality of our test variable, that is height of the plant, which you can check using the Shapiro-Wilks. Now, if you don't know how to check for normality, you can check my video on how to check the normality in data, which is appearing in the I button on the upper right end of your screen. Once the normality assumption is also met, we need to be sure of this thing that the two groups are not related, that the two groups should be independent of each other. In this case, there are no plants which have been treated with both of the fertilizers. So plants which were given fertilizer brand F1, they were unique, and the plants which were given or treated with fertilizer brand F2, those were unique. So the two groups are unrelated to each other. And lastly, the independent sample t-test assumes that the variance of the two groups you are measuring are equal in population. So in order to do so, when we would be applying this test, we would be getting the Levene's test values also, which I'll explain to you when we would be going to the output windows. In this case, before moving to the application in SPSS, we need to define our null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. The null hypothesis for this independent t-test is that the population means of the two unrelated groups are equal. Means the plant heights of plants which have been treated with fertilizer brand F1 is equal to the plant height of those plants which have been treated with fertilizer brand F2. That is, mean of sample 1 is equal to the mean of sample 2, and alternate hypothesis would be the logical opposite to same, that the mean across two groups is not same. So let us move to SPSS now. In the SPSS software, under variable view, I have defined two variables. One, the categorical one with the name of brand, and other, the test variable, which is the height of the plant. I have defined the same under labels. Because our fertilizer brand is a categorical variable, so I have defined two values over here for it. Value 1 has been assigned to fertilizer brand F1 and value 2 has been given to the label of fertilizer brand F2. I have now brought dummy data into the data view, where 1 is fertilizer F1 and 2 represents fertilizer F2, and the height variable represents the height of the plant. I can use this toggle button to see that what are the labels given to this number 1 and 2. Now, in order to apply independent sample t-test, we would be going to the menu of analyze, to compare means, and to the third test of independent sample t-test. Independent sample t-test dialog box would appear, and our dependent variable or the test variable is the plant height. So I would be bringing it under the test variable, and our grouping variable is the fertilizer with two groups in it. So I would be bringing the fertilizer under grouping variable. You would be able to see question marks over here because the group number is not defined, how many groups are there. So we need to click on define groups, and there are two groups only, 1 and 2. So group 1 is 1, group 2 is 2, and click on continue. Now I would simply click on the OK button. We would be getting two tables over here. One is the group statistics, other is independent sample test. As there is one of the assumptions in case of independent sample t-test that the equal variance must be assumed. So we need to check first of all the Levene's test for equality of variance. Now I would be checking the significance value of F test. If this significance value of F test is more than 0.05, we would assume that the equal variances have been assumed in the test variable. Otherwise, if this value of significance is less than 0.05, equal variances are not assumed. As in our case, this value is more than 0.05, so I would be checking this particular value of significance two-tailed, that is 0.354. So this is the value of the probability or the p-value of the independent sample t-test for this particular example. Since this p-value is greater than 0.05, the decision would be that there is no statistically significant difference between the two groups. So null hypothesis is accepted or not rejected, because the thumb rule is if P is low, H0 must go. If P is high, H0 would stay. Thus, there is not enough evidence to conclude that the mean height of the plants based on two fertilizer brands are different. Thank you so much. I hope you find this demonstration easy to understand.